You're listening to 99.1 WQRT LP, and welcome to Radio Free Book Club for October 2025. I'm Ken Honeywell. I'm a writer and reader from Indianapolis, and this month we're taking a break from talking about new novels to consider a classic. We tried to do this once before, a little more than a year ago. Soon after the death of the great Canadian short story writer Alice Munro, we planned to discuss her collection, Hate Ship, Friendship, Courtship, Love Ship, Marriage. And in fact, 3/4 of our panelists today were supposed to talk about that book when literally 2 days before we were set to record, Alice Munro became the subject of some pretty horrifying revelations that put a damper on our enthusiasm to have that discussion right then. I hope we can, at some point in time, make it back to those really amazing stories. But in the meantime, we decided this month we would talk about a work that is already so revered and maligned that we could heap all the praise or scorn we wanted to on the book and the author. And that book is Lolita, the 1955 novel by Russian and American author Vladimir Nabokov. Lolita was first rejected by many American publishers before being published by Olympia Press in France. Graham Greene got a hold of one of the 5,000 copies in print and named it one of the best books of the year, after which the editor of the London Sun Express called Lolita, quote, the filthiest book I have ever read, and pure unrestrained pornography. British customs officers were instructed to seize all copies entering the United Kingdom. It was banned in France, but the word was out. It wasn't published in the U.S. until 1958, but Lolita was a hit out of the gate in its third printing within days, selling 100,000 copies in its first 3 weeks. It was estimated that even 20 years ago, Lolita had sold over 50 million copies worldwide. The book and the film rights made Nabokov a very wealthy man, rich enough to quit his teaching job and move to Switzerland and write whatever the heck he wanted. But beyond all of that, Lolita, that word, has become cultural shorthand for a sexually seductive young girl, fair or not, and that in itself is a source of plenty of controversy. We'll get into some of that. We definitely don't have time to get into everything one might say about Lolita. But we have an extremely well-qualified bunch of Radio Free Club members to do the talking, and I would like for them to introduce themselves. Hello, Susan.
Hello, Ken. I'm Susan Neville. I was supposed to be on the Alice Munro discussion, and now I'm back in even deeper hot water, I guess. I'm a writer and teacher from Indianapolis.
Thanks, Susan. How's your summer been?
It's been pretty good.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hey, we have a new Radio Free Book Club member here, and I would like for her to introduce herself.
Hello, Ken, Susan, Dan. I am Ann Laker, and I feel like this is one of those crossover episodes. As someone who hosts a different radio show here on WQRT related to movies, it's kind of like when, I think Phyllis Diller guest starred on Scooby-Doo, something like that.
That's a very good comparison, Ann. That's the one I was thinking of, for sure.
Absolutely. She did?
She did. And I'm a freelance writer, sometime poet, and grant writer here in Indianapolis, and I'm a Radio Free Book Club fan, having especially enjoyed the Miranda July discussion.
Yeah, that was a good one. And Ann, what is the name of your show?
Flick Fix.
And how often can we hear that?
When I'm in the mood.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. It's a great show. I'm a fan of your show too. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Hello, Dan.
Hello, Ken. I'm Dan Barden. I'm a writer and a teacher, and I want to say rail splitter. I'm not sure what a rail splitter is, but
not either. But that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's like Lincoln was a rail splitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were a flaneur at one point.
A flaneur? Yeah, I'm still a flaneur.
Cool.
Yeah. I've enjoyed being on the show many times. I always feel like I'm just brought on by Ken to cause trouble.
And you do it so well.
You do it very, very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody. Before we get going, please know that we are a book club, so we will be spoiling the heck out of Lolita. So if you've never read it and you want to listen later, you can do that, because you can find this and all the episodes of Radio Free Book Club on Spotify, Apple, just about anywhere you stream podcasts. We hope you'll also subscribe to our Radio Free Book Club Substack for non-spoiler notes about the book, including whether or not we would recommend it. So let's get started talking about Lolita. But first, what is your, like, how often, when did you read Lolita, and what else have you read of Nabokov, Susan?
Let's see. This is the third time I guess I've read it, and the first time was a couple of decades ago, so it was really interesting to visit it again. And I've read a couple. I've read Pale Fire, and Speak Memory. Don't ask me anything about them. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, great. Anne, how about you?
Yeah, when I was working on my master's degree in English at formerly known as IUPUI, I was studying cinema actually, and this novel came up as a novel that had been adapted into 2 films over 2 different decades, and so also a friend of mine handed me the novel and said she hated it, and that made me interested.
Yeah, why'd your friend hate it?
It's been a while. I can't recall the specifics, but I should have called her before this to remind me.
Well, she's not the only person who has hated the book over the 70 years since it's been out. So, yeah. Dan, how about you?
I just sitting here, I suspect that it was on a reading list in college, and that I might have read it in that weird way that one reads things in college where they don't stick to your brain at all. So this feels like the first time I've read it, and I've never read anything else by Nabokov.
Yeah, I've read it at least a couple times before, and I had never read any other Nabokov, but I also just read Pale Fire, and that was amazing and nuts.
Yeah.
And to the point that I also bought this annotated Lolita, and I really couldn't engage it after reading Pale Fire, because Pale Fire is just this annotated 999 long poem that is sort of about the poem, but mostly not. And I just couldn't take the notes in this book seriously. So it was super weird. How about the movies? Anyone seen the movies? I don't know if I've ever seen. I know I've seen part of the old one, the 1962 Kubrick one, but I don't know if I've ever seen that all the way through. And I haven't seen the Adrian Lyne one. Anne, how about you?
Yes.
I assume you have seen both of them.
I've seen them multiple times, and it's wild to think of James Mason as Humbert, a woman/girl named Sue Lyon as Lolita, and Frank Lynn. No. That's the Lynn one. Look at me. I'm mixing up the Lolita metatext.
Well, Peter Sellers
there
was
you go. Peter Sellers,
the co-star of the early one.
And Shelley Winters as Charlotte, the mother of Lolita.
Mm-hmm.
And so some were looking at that as kind of a glib comic interpretation, with Humbert being kind of hapless and Lolita being kind of in control.
And a lot of Peter Sellers improv that is super weird, to the point that, the ad campaign was, how did they make a film about Lolita? And the answer might be, they really didn't.
They really didn't.
Well, and Nabokov tried to do a screenplay, and so did quite a few others, and it was kind of cooked a couple of times.
Yeah. How about the one from the 90s? How is that? I know I've never seen that.
Yeah, that's by, as you said, Adrian Lyne, also the maker of Flashdance, 9.5 Weeks, and Fatal Attraction. So you can kind of imagine the lens that he brought to it, starring Jeremy Irons, and here I go, Frank Langella as Quilty, and Melanie Griffith as the mother of Lolita, and a person named Dominique Swain. Yeah, that has a few layers to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I watched. I went onto YouTube because I hadn't seen either of the movies, and I went onto YouTube and I was like, okay, let's just see what this looks like. And it showed me some scenes with Jeremy Irons just looking longingly at Lolita, and I was like, no, I can't. I love Jeremy Irons too much to like invest myself in that gaze. And then, but knowing that Melanie Griffith is Charlotte is like, that's weird. Yeah.
I've heard she's a great Charlotte.
Well, there was controversy that she played a more frumpy Charlotte. Like Charlotte is not attractive, where you could imagine from the book Charlotte that she actually is objectively attractive, but Humbert, being kind of ill, you might say, doesn't find her so. But then thinking about Melanie Griffith as a potential actual Lolita from her life as a rising star under the tutelage of her famous mother, is interesting.
Yeah, Susan, familiar with the movies?
I saw the Stanley Kubrick one and have read about Nabokov in California, mostly there because he had been so poverty-stricken and always needed money. But I'm not that familiar with them, except that the Lolitas are not as young as they are.
They're not.
In the book, and in part, Nabokov wanted that to be the case. He said that he wanted somebody who maybe they could find a dwarfess or something, which is a very, very Nabokovian thing to say.
Yeah, and yet I think probably just kind of in all our heads, and I don't mean to speak for all of you, but that image of Sue Lyon wearing heart-shaped sunglasses looking over a book is like the image of Lolita. If you think of Lolita, that movie poster is kind of the image you get.
Mm-hmm. And just like Nabokov, these two filmmakers each had to deal with, censorship and the moralists coming for their art. And those dilemmas multiply with what I call in my thesis that I did the Lolita metatext, kind of the throwing Lolita into the culture, and then what did the culture do with it?
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, Susan, you are somewhat responsible for our talking about this today. I asked you, I said I was getting kind of bored with some of the contemporary fiction I was reading. I wanted to talk about something else. What did you recommend? You threw out a bunch of things, and I think we just kind of settled on Lolita. Why did you think about Lolita?
Well, I think obviously because in the culture right now, there's there's just been so much about Jeffrey Epstein, and so I was thinking about these characters, about Britney Spears. Could even tie the new album by
Taylor
Swift. Oh my God, how can I forget that? Yeah, by Taylor Swift into it, because there are a lot of kind of what happens to these girls. They end up as Ophelia. So I think that's in part, and I also it's so rich and interesting, and in places funny and morally complicated, or not morally complicated, I don't think it is, but it's a good book to talk about, and people have no idea what it really is. Like all those millions of copies that sold, I wonder how many were actually read.
What a good question.
Yeah, because it's not in any way pornographic. I doubt that anyone would pick it up like they pick up a Penthouse or something.
They would be disappointed.
It's very, very, very disturbing because the narrator is a very disturbing human being.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not pornographic, I don't think. So.
Yeah, I think it would be hard for me to think of it as pornographic, having read it. It's not, there's like almost no graphic sort of sex scene in the book at all.
No, I mean, you know what's going on.
You know what's going on.
Yeah, you know what's going on, but he pretty makes it a little pretty at times, and every once in a while you are aware of the horror, but it's also like one of those books that you can it's English teachery. You can talk about it, on so many different levels, and you could talk about it all day or, all week, because it's about America in the 50s, and it's about butterfly collecting, and it's, it's just, and it's about art and beauty, and it's just an amazingly complex book.
I don't think I have ever tried to prepare for one of these shows more than I tried to prepare for this one, and I still feel like totally unprepared.
Absolutely.
Like
I feel you go down rabbit holes. Like, I think I need to read about idealism and materialism. Mm-hmm. It's like you just do, and it's just very interesting.
I agree. Dan, you did not remember having read this book, and maybe have or haven't. What did you think of it?
Well, I kind of want to hear what my esteemed colleagues have to say about it, because it didn't land with me as a great novel, and I know that puts me at odds with a lot of the culture. I was annoyed by. I mean, going into it, I think I was annoyed by the using the narrative of the seduction of a 12-year-old as, the structure that you're going to hang this whole thing on. I mean, it seemed almost like let's see if I can pull this off. You know what I mean? Let's see if I can write the great, American novel about something that is so horrible in reality. And which to me is like a kind of literature that I'm just not that interested in. And then I was just sort of like, yeah, it seemed to, yeah. My hot take is that it was basically a Jim Thompson novel filtered through the consciousness of an overeducated white Russian, and it didn't remind me of America, and I was annoyed by the way that it depicted America, and I was annoyed by the way that it loved America, even, because it just didn't seem like, it seemed like so much literary artifice rather than somebody trying to engage with truth. And then and the first place that train left the station was, with there are 12-year-olds, within the square mile we're in right now who are being sexually abused, and I don't feel precious about that. I don't want to say that you can't write a novel about that, but does it have to be such a show-offy, overblown novel?
Again, really good questions, and I want to talk about those a little more. But Anne, I want to ask you, you did your thesis on Lolita, so I want to know what you think about it overall. I mean, also to, something Dan said, this was not the first time Nabokov wrote a story about a sexual abuser. He wrote earlier versions of Lolita actually as a short story, and I think as maybe even a novel in Russian. So this was not just like this didn't just pop into his head and he had to get it out. He was getting it out for a long time.
There are some biographies that say that he was not abused, but that initial scene where Lolita's sitting on his lap and he's underneath the blanket was something that he had experienced. So there's that. And then the argument about the beautiful language and the horrific thing that's going on with this girl, I think he lays that out in the very first sentence when he said, you can always trust a murderer to have a fancy prose style or something.
Yeah, right.
And he is, I think, Humbert is trying to seduce us into thinking, it's okay. And so Lolita has to, only now and then will he say, and she cried every night. Mostly he sees her as, seductive, as being a nymphette that was born to be a nymphette, and they're almost demonic. They're almost not real.
Yeah, he says they're demonic.
He says they're demonic several times. And yeah.
Which really feels like a blaming the victim, of course.
Absolutely, which is why I like reading it, because, all of the kind of rationalizations he uses, and still trying to seduce us into being on his side because we are the ladies and gentlemen of the jury. He's talking to us, so he's constantly telling us how handsome he is, and rationalizing that she was seductive, and his voice is seductive. And I think, oh yeah, all those 12-year-old girls are, so much, I think on one level it helps you understand that and be horrified by it, and what the person is thinking, and ultimately, I think on a moral level, his real problem is that he cannot see anything outside himself. He cannot see another human being as real. And so, at the end of the book, he sort of does. He says she was a child, she was a child, she was a child. And so I think it's important in terms of understanding how this cultural thing that has happened since Beatrice and Dante, and how it has happened and how horrifying it is, because it is horrifying. And I think Nabokov purposefully shows us that it's horrifying, and has even said that he means that language to be seductive, and he means to seduce you with it.
Yes. Okay, Anne. Now you.
I'm thinking of what Dan said about truth. I guess, did you say that if this was supposed to be about the pursuit of truth, it was deeply disappointing? Or what was your comment about that?
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, it's more like there's some name for it in critical theory, I'm sure, but it's like the thing that Susan just described is a trap, right? Because it's a trap that you can't get out of, and that I don't think that's an advantage of the book. I think that that's a problem with the book. It takes you farther away from the truth, which is that this young woman's life has been destroyed.
Isn't it amazing that language can do that, even take you further from the truth? I mean, we're seeing that happening right now in our culture.
Right.
But I guess upon rereading it, and it's been about 20 years, it was harder than I recalled. It was just harder to live in this kind of hermetic scene. But it's also difficult not to be completely blown away by his use of words. I mean,
right.
For someone who's not even a native English speaker, there's even like, okay, this is such a throwaway line, but I wrote down, a raindrop fell on my knuckles. I mean, just someone who took the time to to say that in this universe of language. I guess is he showing off? Is it overblown? Perhaps, but
it's
he's pretty good at what he does.
Who's showing off and is overblown, and his language gets simpler at the end when he says she's a child. Yeah.
Yeah, I just felt like after seducing us for the whole book, I was like, I don't believe you. You know what I mean? I don't believe you. You're still in love with the words in your head.
You don't believe Nabokov, or you don't believe Humbert?
I don't believe Humbert.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you can't. He's a completely unreliable narrator.
Okay, I got another hot take.
Yeah.
Please.
So I was searching what you guys were talking for an analogy, and I thought of that. Remember about 5 years ago when the guys that made Game of Thrones were going to make it, their next TV series was going to be about the South not having lost the Civil War?
Yes, I do. It was an alternate history thing.
And I was like excited. I was like, I want to see what these guys do with that. And then there was just like an immediate and incredible backlash against it. And I think that the backlash was right. Like that they were like, we don't want you to make slavery look anything other than horrible. And we don't care if it's a complex portrayal. That shouldn't happen. And I think that the people that objected to it were right. And I feel this way about that. It's like, yeah, I get all the complexity, but still at the end of the day, it's Humbert looks good.
Oh, no. No, there are points when he takes his hand and slaps her across the face. He lets that out. But I was thinking, since we're talking about film, I was trying to compare it to Woody Allen's Manhattan.
Yeah.
And
great comparison.
It is a good comparison, and it shows you why Manhattan is not a great film to me. Its beauty is undeniable. Its portrait of New York. But the Lolita in that film, there's never any kind of acknowledgement from that that she is suffering or has suffered, or from Woody Allen that or the character whoever wrote it. There's not that moral complexity. He, from at the very end, still sees her as a seductress, as, what they're doing is fine. And I was really disturbed when I watched Manhattan. I hated it from the first, from the beginning.
And how hard is that? Because it is beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And so I was thinking as I'm reading Lolita, why am I not? Because I know that the artist in charge of this piece knows that he is not doing the very basic, human moral thing, which is being able to see outside himself and see somebody else and have empathy. And he clearly has no empathy. He talks about, how can he kill Charlotte Hayes? How can
he really couldn't. Could
yeah,
he?
he really couldn't. Which is where he's trying to convince us that he's really a good guy, isn't he? And so this is different because when he sees Lolita at the end of the book, and she's all along she's been this normal 12-year-old, and with nobody in the world. There's nobody she can run to except for this other person who's on Epstein's Island, Claire Quilty.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing she can do.
So how could a critic as eminent as Lionel Trilling call this a love story?
Right. My copy of the novel, it has a quote on the front: "The only convincing love story of our century."
That was Lionel Trilling, wasn't it?
That was Lionel, yeah. Vanity Fair.
That just seems crazy.
And so I think it was so easy for critics, male critics, to identify with Humbert and just go right ahead and do that. You know what I mean? At that time, I guess it was pretty easy to do, and they had plenty of permission and platform to do that. I just think about the word love, and how the Inuit culture has lots of different words for snow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is wrong with our English language? We don't have nearly enough words to describe something resembling love. And so I think that was a question you had posed to us in our kind of context for our discussion. And as Susan says, selfishness, profound selfishness and myopic obsession is not the same as love.
Right.
I'm here to tell you.
But he at the very end says, thankfully, I think even when I see Dolores now, she's Dolores, she's not Lolita, that he still has, he thinks he's telling us that he really did have feelings for her. And but I think you're right, only at certain points would somebody try to figure out how to make it a love story. Though it feels not like he's also said that it's a love story for the English language, and I get
right.
that. It's a love story for beauty. I don't know.
Some people said it was like a love story about his love affair with America.
No.
Yeah.
Dan says no.
No.
Oh, I don't know. He sees it pretty darn clearly.
Well,
there were times. Oh yeah, never mind.
So you're not buying the love affair with language either?
Oh yeah, that's where my problem is. He's just he's too good of a writer. I've always had a problem with people that just are brilliant sentence makers, and because for me it's a way to obscure more important and more fundamental truths. And so, I was always so mad at Fitzgerald, because it was just really
That's too easy.
Yeah, is that how you see America? Good for you. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing with him. It's just he's such, he's probably the best. He was probably the best sentence maker in the world when he was alive, but that doesn't get you. That in and of itself doesn't get you closer to the truth. And it remains problematic when you're not seeing what's in front of you, like that. This, I don't have any problem with pornography. Pornography is fine with me. But it's like he raped. This is a novel about somebody raping a 12-year-old hundreds of times.
Right.
Hundreds of times.
3 times in one morning.
Right.
Yeah, and it's so the very fact of that beautiful language can't help but obscure that. Can't help but obscure that.
Dan, you might like to know that Nabokov also thought that Fitzgerald was trash. So, go ahead.
Well, and he goes out. I was feeling, I like this idea of like, that Jim Thompson, Nabokov, and he goes out of his way in the afterward to go after romance novels and detective stories, and I'm just like, this is a romance novel and a detective story filtered through the imagination of somebody who writes really, really, really well. You know what I mean? And I'm a pretty smart guy. I get all the play with language, but it doesn't obscure, for me, the fundamental story.
Yeah, you are certainly not alone in that. Anne, what was your thesis about?
My project was to see if we could liberate Lolita by looking at, the whole myth that, was created in the novel, which then spilled over into the culture, as Susan said, with, everyone from Jean-Benet Ramsey to, and then the two filmmakers, within this adaptation, was there any way for Lolita to escape her fate as a character and as a myth? And I was concluding yes, because you have two actresses who have agency in creating a character for screen. You have spoken dialogue. We don't hear a ton of dialogue from Lolita in the novel. We hear a few quotes here and there. So can Lolita find agency by escaping the confines of the novel? And I thought, yes. For example, tennis is described as something she's really good at in the novel. And it's one time when it seems like her body is her own. And it's beautiful when she plays tennis. Once again, Humbert is fetishizing pretty much everything she does. But it does seem like there's moments of peace and liberation in that activity. And so it's great to go back and read the novel and watch the films to find where is Lolita acquiring, some sort of her own power. And it's great to be looking for that.
I think I read it a second time after talking to you about your thesis. And so I have been really aware since then of all the times that Humbert accidentally gives her a voice.
Yeah.
When she cries, when, he notices things. And usually he doesn't notice. He's a very careful observer of motel rooms and, a lot of things about the American landscape. But he lets Lolita escape now and then, which makes you realize how very, very miserable she actually is.
Yeah, most of the time he's directing our attention over here, pay no attention to Dolores.
Right, exactly.
But he's given us something else to look at. But yeah, those times when the very brave young girl comes through, those are really interesting.
And she is capable of calculating her own escape. Thank goodness. Yeah.
Susan, is this, it has been described this way. Is Lolita in any way a feminist novel?
Oh, wow, what a good question. I don't know. Well, I mean, as I read it, it is because he is a monster, and the girl at the end escapes and finds a life, and there's never any question but that he's a monster, I guess. That doesn't make it feminist, so I'm trying to think exactly, what do you think?
I don't know. I think it's hard for me to look at it as a feminist novel, but I think it's pretty clear that we are not supposed to like Humbert, regardless of Humbert's, attempts to get us to love him. And, we do get those glimpses of Dolores as as different from Lolita.
And I mean, you can read it with a feminist lens too, because of the way he looks at any woman outside of the nymphette phase.
Yeah, they're all kind of grotesque.
Grotesque to him. There's something about a grown woman's body that's very grotesque to him. And so, yeah, you can do a feminist reading in that way.
And what's with all the doubles? What's with all the repetition of just weird things like the enchanted huntress and the hunted whatever those are?
Yeah, that's just Nabokov having fun again and showing off, with creating masquerades and layers and Russian dolls. And it's so interesting to think of his mind and the synapses within it and the associations that he makes, which seem to just pour forth from him onto the page. I mean, constructed in the voice of Humbert, but it's just, he can't help it. It's like a faucet that keeps running. And I guess I'm talking about Nabokov here in terms of these playful associations. And it's, just a few steps from madness. I mean, I think, that's where genius and madness come close together. I appreciate what you said, Susan, about, and I don't know if we're, quote, supposed to do it, but it really is interesting to read the biography of an artist and then, have it inform the work they created. Because as I was reading this, not having read very much of his other work, admittedly, I'm like, yeah, why is this a story we're being told? And you kind of answered that question somewhat.
Well, I think, the butterfly thing is odd because, as you know, he was an incredible, he worked at a museum for a while.
He was a lepidopterist.
He was a lepidopterist, a world-renowned lepidopterist. And so, there's a story about like a butterfly coming in to his window while he's teaching, and he just grabs it between two fingers. So that means searching. When he and his wife took this very same trip, and he was married happily for 50 years.
And she was a big collaborator.
She was a big collaborator and brilliant and also multilingual. But when you become obsessed with something like butterflies, they're beautiful, but what do you do with them? You have to take them, kill them in a jar with ether and pin them to show them in a collection. So I think, I don't know, you never know, but I think that was also part of where the idea came from. It's like,
captured beauty.
Yeah, captured beauty. And if you capture that beauty for a novel, there's, I guess this is what I was thinking, sorry if I'm talking too much, but the doubling, I think, has to do with it makes you think, oh, that's impossible. She can't be going to Camp Q. There can't be two places called the Enchanted Hunter or the Enchanted. And so that makes you question whether any of it is real to begin with, or if all the language that he's making is an artifice out of words to cover up the thing that's going on. It even begins with Lolita, love of my life, fire of my loins, and he talks a long time about Annabel Lee.
Yes.
And he was a big Poe fan. And so he says several times in the novel, or Humbert does, that the first Lolita was Annabel Lee in The Kingdom by the Sea. And he quotes that all the way through. And so there's a difference between Lolita, the archetype where, Lolita, the butterfly captured and killed, and the Dolores Hayes, who goes on to live. And there's a difference between Humbert and the artist who creates Humbert. And Humbert says, imagine me. Please imagine me, because that's the only way I'll live. So Lolita and Humbert both live, in a way, eternally as characters. And we see Humbert's in the news every day, and we see Lolita's, and we're horrified by it, but not horrified enough. And maybe if we read Lolita in the way I think that it was intended, or thought about some of these issues, and really looked at Humbert, we might understand and help change the lives of young girls.
Whoa.
That's thank you, Susan. That's not talking too much at all. I did want to say that I had heard, and I'm not sure this is true or not, but one of the reasons he agreed to do the screenplay was he could go to Los Angeles because there were different butterflies there.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And I think, Susan, you kind of explained the meaning of that final passage, which I think you asked us to think about, Ken, which was, do you want
I am
to read
thinking
it?
of aurochs and angels, the secret of durable pigments, prophetic sonnets, the refuge of art, and this is the only immortality you and I may share, my Lolita.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a beautiful couple of sentences.
Can I bring this to a different place?
Sure.
Just thinking about sex and commerce. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of comic books and clothing and candy that is exchanged, that Humbert provides Lolita in exchange for her cooperation, I guess, or even just tolerance. But when you think about today, and I mean, I cannot speak with authority on this, but there are websites where, women can make large profits, and I don't know what the age limits are, but for, offering themselves photographically, I guess, for other people's consumption, and that many millions of dollars are being made. And it's kind of like, oh, the oldest profession in the world, once again. Is that agency for women or not? It just, bringing it back to the present.
Well, let's talk about love for a minute. Can we say in any way that Humbert loved Lolita, or that Lolita, or that, let's call her Dolores, did Dolores love Humbert? She said he was a good dad.
I choked on that one. Well, it's funny. I mean, he probably loves the way that a lot of people love is by creating an image in his mind, constructed from language and dreams and, romantic stories. And he calls that love. I don't think he's that, aside from his big brain, I don't think he's that different than the rest of us, except for the fact that he's using all that language to cover up a horrible crime. So no, he's not. This is why I didn't want, I saw Jeremy Irons there on the screen for 1 second, and it's like, I do not want to process this man through Jeremy Irons, who I've been in love with since The French Lieutenant's Woman. I don't want to see him looking like somebody in love, with a 12-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And all the way through the book, he says that Lolita and everybody get their ideas from those movie magazines too, which, so if you watch that movie, maybe you would get the wrong idea. And like, she closes her eyes because that's what she's supposed to do. The movies, told her. And she reads movie magazines all the time, which, getting back to Woody Allen, I could see a young girl watching that film and thinking, oh, it's so romantic to be Mariel Hemingway.
Sure.
Oh my God, she's so beautiful. And she wears the plaid, skirts and everything. And in this, you would never think it's so romantic to be Dolores Hayes.
No.
Well, and thinking about the different expressions of this text, the Adrian Lyne film is actually gives more agency to Lolita than the novel or the Kubrick. She's this is an actress named Dominique Swain. I think she was 15 at the time of filming, and she had ideas about how she wanted this to go. I think that she was the one that said, well, Jeremy Irons, I need you to smack me in the scene. And like she was a creative collaborator on creating this character. Her Lolita is very energetic, like physically, and is actually hits Humbert back. And Jeremy Irons plays kind of like a romantic slob, which I still understand if you don't want to see him that way. But it's funny because, Adrian Lyne is known for, really creating some over the top subjectifications of women, but it's, if you're looking for kind of a, maybe a little relief from how the novel is put together, you might actually find it useful.
Well, there's an interesting, just kind of on the back of that, there's this theory that like maybe Humbert made up the whole back end of the thing, like he never actually found Lolita, never actually killed Quilty, that was all just, something that he made up. Anybody think anything about that?
There's, I noticed, haven't read anything about that, but I noticed that that the book became a lot more artificial at that point. It felt a lot more concocted.
There's apparently like a time loss. There's a loss of 3 days or something in there that people have said that there was a theory that it was just a mistake on Nabokov's part because he was kind of famously sloppy writer, but he also translated this into Russian himself. So he, not only translated it that way, but I guess kind of even amplified that point. So interesting to think about.
I'm sure there was nothing unintentional in his work. I find that hard to believe.
I do too, especially since Vera, like he wrote everything on note cards and his wife typed everything up, and she was a stickler. And I can't imagine that it is an error, but he does all the way through drop little hints accidentally about the year he spent in the sanitarium, or that's when I was blah blah blah. So he may be trying to convince us that he is mad, and that who knows.
Yeah, the note cards were hard for me because I also just read Pale Fire, and that 999 line poem was written on note cards that were a big part of the plot. And it was just kind of blowing my mind. I was getting everything really confused.
Can you speak more about Pale Fire, because I have not engaged?
It is it kind of like Lolita. It starts with a foreword that kind of proclaims what you're about to read as a masterpiece. Then there's the 999 line poem, which is really brilliant. I mean, the poem is amazing. But then there's commentary. The editor's commentary on the poem, the notes to the poem, that are really about the editor, not very much about the poem. And it's crazy. But, I mean, in the same way, in that same kind of Nabokovian way, the language is just unbelievable. And it's funny, and it's a lot less serious, but it's really funny.
He had a lot of influence on postmodern writers, as you can probably guess from this, because he's always playing around with, okay, this is something, with that, like making up his own footnotes. And,
right. The footnotes are part of, like, you have to read the footnotes after you read the book. Yeah. And you can read it, you can read the poem and then read the notes and go back and forth. It's crazy.
It's like amazing. David Foster Wallace.
It really is.
And, I mean, David Foster Wallace obviously was influenced by Nabokov.
Well, we are rapidly running out of time here, and I feel like we've barely talked about Lolita. But go ahead, Anne.
I wanted to ask Dan another question about your take on America, about Nabokov's take on America. And as Susan said, a lot of it's mimicked by Nabokov's actual trip looking for butterflies, which includes a stop in Indiana. Did you know that? Yeah. Have you been there?
No. If you have, I want to hear about it. But one thing I discovered is that Nabokov's first American publisher was Bobbs Merrill in Indianapolis.
Hey. Wow.
Is that weird?
That is weird.
That is weird.
Yeah. And he was so excited he got $600 or something for a book. And at the time they were starving. I mean, they had come from Stalinist Russia to Berlin right when Hitler is coming into power and his wife is Jewish. I mean, they
gotta get out again.
Got to get out again, which is why he would be very interested in somebody who could be charming and convincing in language and be evil. I mean, because we've got Hitler, you've got Stalin. I mean, that's yes, very interesting.
Well, just really fast. My husband's from the Evansville area, and they have a tiny, adorable zoo called the Mesker Zoo.
I've been there.
Yes, and it used to have this big boat where monkeys would just
Oh,
run
yeah.
around on it without a fence around it or anything. Anyway, there was a little plaque there that said, Vladimir Nabokov was once here. But
That's
back,
so great. I love it.
back
Well, that
to
showed up in the
Dan.
novel, right? The
Yeah, it
monkey
does.
showed up.
Yeah.
It did. But when you're talking about, you think that he has contempt for America? Is that what comes through for you?
Yeah, it wasn't really contempt. It's just that and I can't support this in any meaningful way, but it's like it just felt like he missed it. He didn't see it. And there was a glibness about and maybe it's just the glibness of the way everybody saw America in the mid 50s, but it didn't feel like the place that I grew up, I mean, he didn't seem contemptuous, but he seemed very European.
They are beautiful, heart-renderingly beautiful, those wilds, with the quality of wide-eyed, unsung, innocent surrender. Sounds like Lolita. That my lacquered, toy-bright Swiss villages and exhaustively lauded Alps no longer possessed. But then a wire receptacle on the curb was very particular about acceptable contents: sweepings, paper, no garbage, cherry red letters of light marked a camera shop, a large thermometer with the name of a laxative quietly dwelt on the front of a drugstore. Rubinov's jewelry company had a display of artificial diamonds reflected in a red mirror. Lighted green clocks swam in the limanish depths of Jiffy Jeff laundry. I mean, it goes on, but as someone who took a cross-country trip with my family in an old station wagon in the late 50s, he's got Route 66 down, and it's really interesting.
But it's almost photographic. It's almost documentary. I don't. Again, I just was so tempted to scan those passages because it didn't seem like I don't need a great writer to give me postcards from America. I need him to try to understand it. And I don't think I was annoyed. Particularly those passages annoyed me because it just seemed so much surface,
Well, what are we to make of Lolita today? And kind of along with that question, would you recommend people read this book? Susan?
I guess I would. Yes, I would recommend it. I think it's an important novel. I mean, important, what does that mean? But very influential, beautiful, smart, morally, with a lot of moral depth. I mean, everything. And it has a good plot. It combines high and low art, I guess. And like I said earlier, I think it's important for us to understand what's going on. I want to understand Humbert, like Humbert did not understand Dolores.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I also think that in our culture, we maybe don't spend enough time trying to understand the motives or reasons for the behavior of sexual abuse and anything. There was this documentary called Perverts Park. It was about, and I wasn't able to finish watching it, but I'm really glad I watched the first part. It was a place where convicted sexual offenders live, and someone interviewed them and asked, well, why are you here? Anyway, there's a reason for every behavior, so let's not ignore what we can learn. I would say read this and bring all of your skepticism, all of your defenses, all of your
that's good,
all of it, as Dan did, I think.
Yeah, that's good.
All of your critical thinking to it, and then let's talk again.
Exactly. That's great. Love it.
Dan?
I think there's probably a lot of things that you have to read in order to understand American culture, and I'm embarrassed to say that this is the first time that I've read this, and I feel like I have a better understanding of American literary culture as well. I mean, it's a lot of what I object to in Lolita, I object to in David Foster Wallace, and I object to in a lot of places, kind of this show-offy thing, but how can you got to know what it's actually about? And I also just want to go on record as I don't disagree with anything that Susan or Anne said. I just have my own peculiar response to the book. Everything that they say seems just obviously true,
Yeah. How about recommending it to others? Would you recommend people read it?
Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's why we invite you, Dan.
No,
Yep.
no. I mean, I think like when I encounter students at Butler that haven't seen The Godfather, I say to them, it's impossible to understand American culture without having watched The Godfather. But the Godfather, I think, is a movie that has the kind of moral correctness that this book doesn't have. And it's not about, for me, it's not about the sex, it's about the language.
Mm-hmm.
I just find the language deeply problematic in how good it is.
Yeah. Well, it is that. It is really good. I think I would recommend Lolita. It's just, I mean, Humbert is such a despicable character who spends all those pages trying to seduce you, that I think it's fascinating. And I think the language, I mean, I don't know French, for example, so there's a lot of passages that I have no idea what they said. So that's irritating. But it's really quite an experience. And actually, I would say Pale Fire is a really good, fun, interesting experience, also with a lot of what you would object to about language, Dan.
And I feel that way about David Foster Wallace, actually. It's very difficult for me to get into the long novels, and for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
But not with this book. I'm not sure why.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about some other books. Who has another recommendation for the show? Anybody have one that they have read recently that they would like to lay on us? Dan?
Or a recommendation for the show?
No, for a recommendation for readers.
Oh, readers. I got one that's a recommendation for the show.
What's that?
My favorite book of all time is The Moviegoer by Walker Percy.
Oh,
I love that.
I love that. Well, why don't we all agree that we will talk about The Moviegoer sometime in the very near future?
Okay, but now I'm going to show off. I have the galleys for a book that's coming out next year called Canon by Paige Lewis, which is just like a remarkable fantasy fable, just insane journey, and I loved it.
But not available yet.
Like January, February, I think.
Great, yeah, great recommendation. Great recommendations. Thanks, Dan. Anne, got something for us?
I don't know if this counts in the context, but I've been working to counter my experience of news consumption with poetry.
Oh,
good for you.
That is the
it
antidote.
Definitely counts.
And so I had in my hand a book by our departed friend Kevin McKelvey, and his volume called Dream Wilderness, forgive me. And he has these amazing poems about the Japanese poet Basho, encountering him in the woods while the speaker of the poem is, taking a pee. And it's just fun. It's fun, funny. It's a love story of Indiana's nature, and it makes me feel good to keep Kevin's spirit alive.
That is just a great recommendation, Ed, and what a great guy, and we really miss him. Susan?
I just finished reading The Artist and the Feast by Lucy Steeds, and I enjoyed it a lot. It's about it's another very narcissistic artist and his helper, and she is more of an artist than he is. I don't know. It's a good book.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks. So one of my favorite books of the last couple of years was Susan Choi's 2019 National Book Award winning novel Trust Exercise, which I would highly recommend. She has a new book this year called Flashlight, which Dan, you'll be happy to know, has been shortlisted for the Booker Prize, so I know you're going to be reading that one.
I'm going to read it.
Okay.
It's good.
I'm not sure I loved it, but I really wanted to talk about it because, the story opens with this young girl on a night walk along the shore with her father. He's Korean, but he grew up in Japan, and suddenly the father is gone, and the girl is discovered lying in the sand, soaking wet, unable to explain what happened to her. To say a whole lot more about the novel would be to give away spoilers, but it involves a really crazy bit of history that I had no idea about.
So
it
interesting.
is really fascinating. So maybe we'll talk about that too on an upcoming show. But in the meantime, if anyone wants to talk about it, you can hit us up on the Radio Free Book Club Substack. And with that, we would love for you to subscribe to that Substack for show notes, other stuff. Remember, you can stream Radio Free Book Club practically anywhere you get your podcasts. And with that, for Susan Neville, Dan Barden, and Laker, and all the members of Radio Free Book Club, I'm Ken Honeywell. Thanks for listening. And join us next month when we'll be back reading a current novel, the brand new one from Ian McEwan, What We Can Know. I hope you'll join us. Until then, read a book.